really big pleasure of mine to be here. I'm with Dale Murphy, and just to give this a little bit of perspective, anytime you are able to sit down and interview somebody that you had a poster of them on your wall as a child, that's a big deal in a guy's life. So I appreciate you being here, Dale.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Jimmy.
Those that aren't familiar with Dale Murphy, you've probably been living in a cave for the last 30 years, but Dale Murphy was a 2-time National League MVP for baseball, 7-time All-Star, 5-time Gold Glove winner. And I actually didn't know this till a couple of years ago. I was just Googling something, and you hit more home runs from 1981 to 1990 than any other player in Major League Baseball, and more RBIs.
Yeah, it's interesting. People bring that up as far as the case for the Hall of Fame, which we'll get into later. Some of those things I didn't know as well till I was retired. But the 80s was kind of my sweet spot.
Well, the stat that stood out the most to me is you have 8 children now, and you've been married for over 40 years.
Yeah, we have an MVP in our house, and her name's Nancy. I often think about my career, which is basically the 80s, and retired in 93, didn't play that much in 93, and was hurt in most of the year in 92. So, but Chad was born in 1980, and Madison was born, our 8th child. We have 7 boys and a daughter. Maddie was born in 93. So about when I started, about when I retired, were some very challenging times as far as raising kids and babies. I don't know how Nancy did it. I mean, I chipped in once in a while, but I'm very thankful for Nancy. Our kids have a great mom, and it was kind of a blur to me in a lot of ways, but just so grateful for those years, and for Nancy, who, we went through the whole professional baseball career and raising kids. It's a real challenging thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, life of a baseball player. It's not even football and basketball. You're not on the road nearly as much as you are in baseball.
Right.
I read about when you got traded to the Phillies later in your career. I mean, you already had 7 of your 8 children at that time. I mean, was that just a mess when she had did she handle most of that, or were you able to take some time? Or?
I kind of, the team would say, be on the bus now, be at the game, be here for batting practice, and that's about all I could handle, And Nancy's very well organized, and I can't think of enough words right now to describe how she really handled everything and all that we were doing, and getting traded and selling houses and getting the kids in school. I'm trying to hit a baseball, do well, and that's about the extent of what I could do back then. And so I don't know how Nancy did it. I mean, as far as the moves were concerned, they were all fun and exciting for our kids, I think, and they were exciting for Nancy and I. But logistically, very challenging thing. And you're right, baseball is really unique because of the 162 games and the travel. But really, any professional athlete, the spouses go through some very challenging things without a lot of reward and notoriety.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that gets lost on fans sometimes is, I got to know Jabari Parker a little bit, and his senior year, or his first year at Duke, his 1 year he was there, he was going through a lot of personal issues, and he had a couple games in a row he was struggling. Nobody knew.
Right.
But I mean, how often are these players dealing with issues at home or things that are happening in their lives? You have all these children, how many things you had to have on your mind? Did it affect your game sometimes?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you got to remember that when you see someone in the entertainment field, and they're either on stage, or maybe they on the movie screen, or they're on a basketball court or a baseball field. There's just so much going on in that person's life, and they're human beings, and we do struggle, and sometimes our performance isn't that good, and sometimes sometimes people will run into professional athletes and they seem kind of surly and kind of, what's wrong with the guy? Well, you don't know. You see him on the court or on the field, and you think, well, everything must be great for this person. He's making a lot of money. He's playing well. And, we're just like everybody else. Just like everybody else. We have a real unique profession, and it's very public, but there's a lot of things going on. And I think that was, again, looking back at my career, to have Nancy really handle so many things, because she knew that it's not that she protected me from anything by any means. You got to know what's going on, but she knew that this was important to me. This was my job, and there were certain times, when I, was gone or working or traveling. But it's also, to get back to your point, there's always a lot of things going on in everybody's mind, and it's a very challenging situation to be a public personality, but to be a human being, to have things going on in your life that are challenging.
Well, and people feel like they know you too because they see you every day.
Well,
so they come up and they start wanting to have these random conversations.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's a unique challenge that is. It can be rewarding, but it can be a little awkward at times because you're right. You say you grew up watching WGN or WTBS, and actually baseball is almost every night. And you feel like you get to know these guys, and it can lead to some interesting situations.
Sure. Well, you had some sons or some kids that played college sports. Your son Jake, I know, got drafted or played in went to the Broncos for a little bit. Do you get more nervous? Did you get more nervous as a player, or did you get more nervous watching as a parent when your kids were playing?
Watching as a parent, definitely. And I love to talk to parents of younger athletes and coaches of youth athletes and mentors, and how valuable it is at that time. But I also get it because it can be real challenging, especially to be a parent of someone you always want them to do well. You don't ever want them to strike out, and especially with some football players that I ended up with. Sean went to Utah State and was in the NFL a while. McKay just graduated last year from Weber State, was in camp with the Rams, and so it's much easier being out there. And I know my parents said the same thing when they watched me play, no matter how old I was or what level. It's a very challenging thing. It's just tough. You don't want them ever to fail, but that's going to happen. How do you help them through it? You always want the best for them, no matter what they do. But sports has really got some unique, in our cultures, it really got some unique things. And I always tell parents that you have to be positive, always be uplifting, and understand that they can sense if you're a little disappointed, and you just never you never go there. You always be positive and be there for them. Having
your own career and having the success you did, it probably makes it easier because you weren't the parent that was trying to live through your kids, even though you had some very successful college athlete sons and things like that.
Right. You got to be careful with that as a parent, probably no matter what they do. But our culture in sports, it's really unique because there is a little bit of that. It'll be a good reflection on me as a parent if my son is a good athlete. It's like some of your kids are going to be very athletic and some of them aren't going to be very athletic. What we've learned is they like to do a lot of things. And even some of our kids that are very athletic didn't necessarily like sports, but they had other abilities. We have an artist, we have a professor at Oregon State. We have kids that do all kinds of things, but again, our culture's got this sports thing that is very public, and sometimes we take it too far as parents. So we need to be very careful of that. I get it, I understand it. Because you do fall into that. Well, if he's really good, it must mean I did something, And so you got to be careful with that.
Did you ever try to steer them towards any one thing? Because your kids gravitated, it seems like, more towards football as opposed to baseball, which is kind of interesting, right?
Everybody always asks me, what?
And did you play multiple sports as a kid?
Yeah, I did, and they did. We just whatever they wanted to play, really. But it's tricky because sometimes I would see things, I'd be like, well, maybe he's really good at that. And even our daughter Maddie played baseball at times. She played some volleyball too. And so I think as a parent, you got to be a little careful steering them. Although that's, you just got to be careful because I always tell parents, if they love it, and you got to make sure they really love it. Don't just say, oh, they love it. Talk to them, see what they like to do, and then help them. Be there for them, give them the opportunity, and that's about all you can do, because the rest kind of takes care of themselves. They got to be talented to keep going. But my most important thing is, as a youth athlete, is got to make sure it's a good experience, because it can be a terrible experience.
So do you think it's good for these kids that specialize in one sport now, or the ones that do this travel baseball, or do you think they're better off?
That's the big question in baseball. And I always say, again, if they really love all that baseball, fine. But talk to them. They may like something else as well. They may not like it as much as you think. So travel ball in all sports can be a little bit tricky. Obviously, they don't do it in football. Basketball does it a lot. Baseball, because of the nature of the game, they can do it almost too much. Sure. So you need to be careful. But I would say that if you want a good baseball player, if you want him to be good at baseball, it's also good to do some cross training. I think soccer is a great sport for a number of reasons as far as baseball is concerned, just for footwork and things like that. But a lot of baseball people do not want to hear that I like soccer. It's like, soccer. But, that cross training. So you got to be careful, just like everything else. Don't make sure they're where they want to be. But it is a particular challenge to this day and age, because coaches want you to focus so early. Right. And that you just don't know what a couple years will bring. So you got to be a little careful with that.
I think that's well said. Well, you had, in your case, in 1974, you were the number 6 overall draft pick in the entire draft as a kid in high school, coming out of high school. So was that overwhelming, having that kind of attention and success at such an early age? And how involved were your parents in helping you with that at that time?
Yeah, my parents really helped me. And, it's so far pre-internet and pre-everything that it was a little overwhelming, but there was also a kind of a anonymity to it, because back then we didn't really know. I had to get the sporting news or something the next week to see who else was drafted and where they were from. You know what I mean?
Gotcha, sure.
You didn't have information all the time, but it was a little overwhelming. I felt a little pressure as I started my career, but my parents were really good. They just said I was either going to go to Arizona State, and I had a scholarship offer there, or then I got drafted. And they said, "What do you want to do?" And I just kind of said, "Well, I'll give this professional baseball a shot." They were like, "Okay, let's do it."
That's awesome.
So it was, parents can do so much, and my parents did so much just to relieve some of the pressure. Sure. It's like, we're going to support you. What do you want to do? And then offered some advice, but ultimately they left it up to me, and I got going. But once I started, being the first round draft pick for the Braves, you feel that kind of like you got a bullseye on your back, and you got to do, so you feel that a little bit. But nowadays, with all the publicity, I don't think I could have handled it.
Yeah, do you think, it would be so much harder, I feel like, to be an athlete today versus the 70s or 80s, because every bad game you have, there's millions of haters, Imagine being a football player and you're these fantasy football guys that were, they literally make it personal because you didn't have a good football game.
No, I think we were born in the era we could handle. I don't think I could have handled it now. I think these kids are a little more used to it. It doesn't make them. It's sad to see some of the social media pressure on these kids. They can handle it a little better, but it doesn't mean that it can be very hurtful. Yeah. Some of the things they say about professional athletes and college amateur athletes is really challenging. I think these kids are used to social media, so they kind of let it,
don't take it as personal, maybe.
I think they're better at it, but I don't think I could have handled it. I think I was played in the era I can handle. This is challenging. I can't imagine. This era is very challenging. Meaning that my minor league career wasn't that great. I made a lot of mistakes, and everything you do is instantly, literally, out there worldwide. Everybody can see it. I'm not so sure that would have been a good thing for me, because
it would be hard to keep the big picture in mind when the day to day is so intense in your face all the time.
Exactly, and a very challenging situation. I was at a minor league baseball game for the Braves. I did some part-time work, and a guy hit a home run. I think it was their Double-A team. And before he got to second base, I already had the alert on my phone. and in 15 minutes, I could have watched the video of it. That's minor league baseball.
Wow.
That's, and so all this instant information and publicity of what you're doing. If Braves fans want to know what every minor league guy is doing, and video of it, and you can watch the games on the computer. It's like some of my games were really ugly, and I would not have wanted people to see them, as a kid trying to learn how to play baseball. But it's a different world for sure.
Well, you broke into the league pretty young age. I mean, obviously coming out of high school, you were going to be younger, but you had early success as well. I think it was your third year or fourth year in the league is when you won MVP for the first time. And you guys made the playoffs. Was it the one time you made the playoffs in your career?
The one time.
Did it surprise you a little bit, the early success that you had, or did you kind of expect that, you know what, I'm going to come in and immediately, because you immediately had a huge impact on the team?
No, well, thank you. No, there were, it was a little unexpected, but I think what people forget is that I basically played almost 4 full years of minor league baseball. Okay. Even though I was relatively young, I did a lot of things before that people just kind of notice your career when you get there. It's kind of like the overnight success, and it's very seldom is it ever overnight. You know, I played rookie ball, A ball, double A, triple A. I played 2 years of fall league, instructional league, and a year in the winter in the Dominican Republic before I really got settled. Gotcha. So that's about 1,000 at bats. Even saying that, I really didn't expect to win the MVP in 1982. In 1980, I had moved to the outfield and made my first All-Star team, and I was starting to feel comfortable. Yeah. But things happened a little. I'd probably be lying if I didn't say that it with all that background, it still kind of came a little fast and early, and I was thankful for that. But then there was another level of pressure. It's like, okay, so
now you've won an MVP or two, and now you've got a whole.
So I tried to really make sure that success focused me on my preparation as much as anything else. So, well, I don't know what's going to happen next year, but I'm not going to use this as pressure. I'm going to use it as motivation to get ready for '83, and I ended up winning the second MVP. So it was a special time. It was just a time where athletes will say you're in the flow, and I was just in the flow of those early 80s.
Oh, that's amazing. Was there ever I think every baseball player has their moments in the minors when they struggled. Was there ever a time you almost quit or almost gave it up?
There's times I wanted to. I don't know why. I was drafted as a catcher, and some of my minor league games as a catcher, and my progress wasn't really too well. I started throwing the ball all over the place, not very good defensively. And I didn't really start hitting too well till a couple of years into the minor leagues. So there were some times when I really had some self-doubt. And I think very seldom does anyone make it to the big leagues without a time where they really have some self-doubt. And I think that's just part of life, business, whatever you're doing. It's really, there's a crossroads usually. You say, okay, this is what I got to do. It's either, go a different direction or plow through this. I mean, there were times, when I really wondered, and I guess there are times when I wouldn't have mind if I got hurt. It's like, hey, you got hurt. I just was struggling.
Yeah, struggling. Probably like when I was a missionary the first few months. Like, I'm so glad I finished it, but like there was moments where I'm like, I wouldn't be that mad if I got hit by a car. It's like, don't kill me, but break my leg.
You're not the first former missionary.
We all have those thoughts.
It's a great analogy, and life is like that too. It's not very fun sometimes, and you have a lot of self-doubt. You'll get through it.
Well, I have one of my mentors would always say is that you don't have to love the process. You just have to, the goal, the end, the what you want has to mean that much.
Yeah.
Because then it gets it easy to go through those slumps as
we
call it in baseball.
Well, and baseball, they call it a slump. How do you get out of it? And sometimes it's not getting out of it. It's just getting through it.
Yeah.
You just got to keep getting out there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big challenges with turning professional. In high school, I didn't have a slump. I just kind of went out there. I'd usually get, I think, a couple of hits a day or something like that. Well, all of a sudden, in professional baseball, that doesn't happen. Yeah. No matter how good you are. I'm just thinking of the Braves a lot. Freddie Freeman is even a possible MVP candidate. Well, a few weeks ago, I can't even remember the slump he was in, but it was a bad stretch. Mm-hmm. So no matter how good you are, there's going to be a time, they're going to come up, you're going to get in slumps, and you're going to panic, you're going to crawl into yourself. I always say, the most important thing is stay coachable, listen, because that's one of the first things you do is you stop listening to people because you think you're getting too much information. Well, someone might have a good idea. stay coachable.
No, I think that's great advice for a life slump or a slump in a sport.
Absolutely.
There's things that you're not seeing that maybe are going on about you or that you're doing that other people can probably pick up
Absolutely.
on. So pay attention to those.
And especially hitting.
Yeah.
Video helps. Another set of eyes helps. You don't feel right. What are you doing? Yeah. And same thing as well. You need mentors. Same thing in life or your work, whatever work you do. You need to stay open. But it's really hard sometimes when you're struggling. But I think the thing about a slump is you get through them so much as you get out of them. Eventually you got to stay positive.
I like that. Well, your career obviously you're known, your numbers retired with the Braves. You were kind of that linking piece between the Hank Aaron, Eddie Matthews, Warren Spahn years, and then the Chipper Jones, Tom Glavine years. You're kind of the middle piece there, the one shining star. I remember, as a kid, you played on some really bad teams for a while there, and
really struggled.
The Braves were not that much fun to watch. I remember so many times as a kid, though, you were always on TV, so I'd always try to run to the TV, and if you were either on deck or in the hole, we'd stay and watch until you hit, And so, was it hard being a part of those teams when the culture was a losing culture, and you guys really ended up in the bottom of the standings several years?
Yeah, it is, and it was hard for everybody. There wasn't ever a time when I didn't go out there and get butterflies and want to produce and want to play well for the Braves and the fans that we had there. So there wasn't ever that, but contrast that with the years 82 we went to the playoffs, 83 we finished a couple games back. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to show up and be motivated, and you're not as selfish, you're not thinking about yourself so much. It's when you're on a bad team, you're thinking, okay, I've got to hit a couple more home runs or something. It's just a natural thing to do. But boy, when you're winning, and which I didn't get to do a lot as a professional baseball player, but it's just fun. It's fun to show up to the ballpark. Everybody's pretty much getting along. It's easier to play well in that environment than a losing environment.
The alternative.
Sure.
Well, you played for some great coaches. Some people don't know, but you played for Joe Torre. You played for Bobby
People
Cox.
forget that.
These are two Hall of Fame coaches. Who was the best coach you ever had, and what did he do differently, or maybe that just to you particularly inspired you as a?
Well, I always, there were techniques and that kind of advice, but it's mostly the environment and the tone that. In particular, Bobby Cox and Joe Torre. A lot of people forget Joe was in there in the early 80s with the Braves before he did what he did with the Yankees.
Right.
And Bobby was with me in those early years before he had those. Then he left for a while.
That's right, yeah.
So I was with both those guys early in my career. And it's more of the tone as opposed to specific things that they did. It's more of a tone they set and an attitude. They have mutual respect for the players that is very motivating to play under. You feel that from both those guys.
That's what a lot of people say with especially with Joe Torre. I've heard that so much.
Yeah.
He just kept the Yankee personalities all in a place where they were their most comfortable.
Yeah,
I guess is the way to put it.
And we always think you could just spend a lot of money and get the best team, and it's going to be easy.
Right.
And in basketball, it'd be the Warriors. So everybody thinks, well, maybe in basketball is a little bit easier. You have fewer personalities, but you do need a coach that is going to create an atmosphere where even with all those great players, they're all going to be working together. And my best example I can say is the Yankees during the 80s. Steinbrenner spent more than anybody. Mm-hmm. But you go back to the mid-'90s when Joe was there, and I think Cashman was the GM. The point is, they were spending a lot of money, but all of a sudden there was a missing something there. You just can't spend money. You bring in someone who molds that team and creates an atmosphere where everybody's on the same page. it can't be overstated how important that is.
I think that's great, especially I know how important locker rooms are. It's like you say, you can
Yeah.
have all the most expensive guys in the world, but if there's no motivation, now they've been paid in these different things, you have to find ways to get that team to come together. But
People don't think chemistry is very important, and I think it's vital.
Yeah.
You do need that.
Yeah,
Over the course of a season, any sport, every business, you need chemistry.
yeah, I coached 3 years at Bingham, the high school team, helped out there, and our most talented team didn't win the state tournament.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
the one that came together the most as a team.
Yeah, it really helps because it's just when you think about it, it just is. There's so much to that because there's up and downs during a season, and good chemistry helps you get through the down parts, and it just is invaluable, and that's what a great leader does. There's so much as specific instruction creates an atmosphere with great chemistry.
Oh, that's great. Did you have a favorite teammate? Give us an example of
Well,
of
back
one that you
in those days, Phil Niekro, Hall of Fame pitcher, knuckleballer.
Oh, yeah.
I caught him a few games, which was always an adventure when I first came up before I moved to the outfield. Glenn Hubbard is another guy from Utah that people ask me about. Bruce Benedict was a guy I played with for quite a few years in the 80s. Those are the three guys. I mean, I got great memories, but I think those are the guys I really am thankful that I think about first when I think about how lucky I was to be a teammate. Especially, I think about Phil Niekro. I've always appreciated his example to me on how he handled his career, and just a great guy.
Oh, that's great. I'd read a quote from Glenn Hubbard as I was getting ready for the interview. He said that if Dale Murphy had played in the steroid era, he had passed Hank Aaron in home runs.
Well, it kind of started about the time I finished, and then it really got going in the 90s. And, I never really, we were starting to talk about it. It was like, what are these guys taking? Because
were you aware of it going on? Was it
generally, not specifically,
okay.
And even on teams where people were now we know took them, to me it was a sign that they knew it wasn't right because you never saw it. It wasn't out in the open. It was something they did behind closed doors, and so it is a big advantage to an athlete to take performance enhancing drugs. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say they don't work because guys take them.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of ramifications health-wise and career-wise. Baseball and sports in general are doing a lot better testing. Mm-hmm. And there's some legitimate uses for this stuff. It's just not to hit a baseball a long ways. I just don't. I appreciate baseball taking a much firmer stance and doing a lot more testing and and the Olympics and everybody trying to, run a clean sport. Because you don't want to see an athlete that has the best chemist,
right.
Be victorious. It's not what it's about. It's about fair and balanced competition.
Yeah.
And it's still an issue. And I understand that. And what I tell kids is, look, you got to remember that when you're done, you want to do things the right way. You want to be able to say you did things the right way. That'll be worth more than hitting more home runs.
Yeah, I had a buddy when I was in high school. I hit one home run my last game in high school. I was a little second
awesome.
baseman, 9-hitter, But had a fun career and everything. But I said to one of my buddies once, I'm like, dude, I probably should have taken steroids. I would have hit a lot more home runs. He goes, no, because you would have robbed yourself of the satisfaction of the player you became.
Yeah,
and that was what, and that stuck with me. It was like, it really alleviated me of any thoughts of while I was playing, if I should have been taking steroids or something like that.
But I think that's a great point, and that's what I want to tell young people. And when I speak to young people, is that you got to be who you are, and look back and say, I did my best, and I did it the right way. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say you're not going to be stronger. You may hit a few home runs, but you're going to lose a little self-respect, and you're going to lose respect to those you competed against. Mm.
Well, that was one of the hardest parts about, I guess, for me, about your career, was that you would have been like the guy that benefited the most from the steroids. But yet it was almost hurt you, because that right when everyone started taking was when you didn't. And I mean, you were still had enough years that if had you got that little late in career boost like some of those guys did, you could have played another 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, it's a real advantage for guys in their mid to late 30s, because that's what happens as an athlete. Obviously, your legs go, something slows down, and this performance enhancing stuff will help you play, a little bit longer and stay a little stronger. And so, like I said, I kind of knew what was going on, but I never considered, any of that stuff seriously, because it just, I knew it wasn't right. I'm like, nah, that just, but yeah, I did see some guys that started late in their career and they used it, but now that we know they used it, it's kind of like you just kind of
tainted anyway.
Yeah,
right?
It's tainted. It's like you don't want to end your career and people say, yeah, but he did this.
Yeah, because if it came out at the end of your career, right? Like you had such a great career, and people would have dismissed all the great you did had you used a few years at the end.
Right. It's not worth it.
Right.
It's not worth it. And guys are kind of finding that out now. I mean, the Hall of Fame voting, as far as Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, or you want to throw some names out there. People are kind of, it's going to be a long time before people accept that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I had John Buck, who's a major league player, on the podcast. And I asked him this question. It's one of my favorite questions to ask professional athletes. But who was the toughest pitcher you ever faced as a hitter?
Well, you'd have to Google him.
It's always that guy that you have to Google.
Yeah,
right?
it depends. I mean, if you watched TBS back in the day, but we weren't. But there's a guy named J.R. Richard, pitched for Houston. Big, tall right-hander. Kind of my era's Randy Johnson, except for a right-hander. He had a couple of years where he struck out 300 guys a year and just had some amazing stats and a lot of strikeouts. And he was very intimidating to me. So he was probably the toughest at bat. What I mean by that is sometimes you make outs and it doesn't really seem like it was very uncomfortable up there. Guy didn't throw that hard.
Yeah.
And that would be Greg Maddux.
Oh.
Obviously, Greg is one of the great all-time pitchers. People forget maybe that I faced him when he was with the Cubs as a young player before he came to the Braves.
That's right.
And did some amazing things. So when I just...
Would you just get so mad about a guy like that because the ball's coming in and you just can't make contact with it?
Yeah, exactly. Because he had, a guy like J.R. Richards, power pitcher, he's going to make a mistake once in a while. You hit it, he may strike out. But Maddux, Greg, never made a mistake, and you couldn't guess along with him because he could throw inside, outside, low, high, make his ball curve, throw a change. It was almost like he had 8 pitches, and then he was so smart and studied hitters so well. He knew instantly your weakness, and just very frustrating at bats against him. He didn't make hardly ever make mistakes.
Well, I know you didn't play with Greg, but you were there when Smoltz, Avery, Glavine kind of broke in, right?
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to mentor them a little bit, or did you get to know them before they kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I did what I could, but I could see that potential there. But I got to be honest, Avery got hurt, he probably would have been a Hall of Famer too.
Yeah, he was the best of the bunch for a while.
Well, there was a big debate, I remember, with some coaches when I went to the Phillies. They were talking about the Braves. They go, who do you want, Glavine or Avery for the future? And everybody was going with Steve Avery. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I thought they were good and they were talented, and I was thankful I got the chance to play with. I don't know how much I helped them, except I do know that they were great guys and couldn't be happier for what they've accomplished.
Was it tough? I mean, because you were on those Braves teams that struggled so much. Was it tough when watching? I mean, they went on a 14-year playoff run.
Yeah, it was a little tough. I'll tell you right now. Yeah.
I'm a Cleveland Indians fan, and so 1995, I'm a 14-year-old kid. That was the one year the Braves actually won the whole thing, and so I was... they made me sad that day. But I always liked Greg Maddux. He was just so much fun to watch. But what was that experience? I mean, it was a little bit tough?
It was weird. I mean, I'll be honest with you, because I was there for all those years. Nothing happened. And then I was jealous, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's very humbling when you spend all your time there and you leave, and then they go to the World Series. I can't lie.
Was it the year after you left?
Well, remember I got traded in '90
right.
in August of '90 or something to the Phillies.
'91,
they went to the World Series versus the Twins, and Nancy and I are like, "What?" We're just speechless. We go home, during the off season from Philly, and everybody's just going crazy for the Braves, and we're just.
Oh, because you still lived there in the office?
Yeah, we did. Except for 1 year, we lived in Philly, but we had to go back in the midst of this. Everybody's having fun, and you're like, it's just like, hey, wait a minute. You're
as
right.
a competitor, you probably
jealous.
felt like you maybe could have made that difference to get. They lost the World Series.
Yeah,
you could have been
but mostly you feel like. Dang, they did this without me. I mean, I got to be real honest with you. It was very challenging because you feel forgotten. You spent all this time, and then you leave, and they go to the World Series. It's like, but having said that, it was time for me to go. And we won't get into the trade that much. That's a long story, but I felt it was time for me to move on. I was really struggling. But I have to say that, I was jealous of all those years. I mean, look at how many times. Like you said, what'd you
14
say?
straight.
14 straight. I mean, Chipper Jones had, I don't know how many at-bats in postseason play.
I think it's the equivalent of like 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
crazy amount. I got isn't that amazing? I got 3 games because it was best of 5 back in '82 and we got swept. I got 3 games, and Chipper spent almost his whole career playing in the postseason. It's amazing. I mean, congratulations to them. Would I have liked to have been a part of it? Yeah, it would have been fun.
Yeah. Well, and I felt like you always kind of did what you felt like you wanted to do. I mean, you quit or retired, not quit. You ended your career with 398 home runs. I mean, most people would have kept as long as it took to get to 400. Was that a tough decision, or were you just kind of done and you knew it?
Yeah, I knew it, but baseball is a very even-numbered sport, and a lot of sports are, but especially baseball, 400 home runs. 500 home runs, 3,000 hits is better than 2,900.
Yeah.
There's those round numbers.
There's literally a movie about a guy that gets a hit taken away. And it's kind of Mr. 3000
Mr.
or whatever.
3000.
He does everything he can to get that last.
That's right. It's just a thing. And so I was sitting there at 398, but I was hurting. I had some problems with my left knee. And I was in Denver. Things just were not going that well. People said, well, you could go to the American League and be a DH, but I wasn't really hitting that well, mostly because of my legs. I had a bad knee problem that I couldn't correct. And so I knew it was time, and people said, well, why didn't you? I said, well, because when it's time, it's time. You got to be very careful. Athletes tend to push that envelope a little bit, too far sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I know something that became a big story the last couple of years. You had a Hall of Fame career, most people would say. However, the votes never came to the percentage needed at this point. Do you feel like if maybe you'd have gotten to the 400, you would have gotten more Hall of Fame votes? I mean,
maybe
obviously can still get in from the Veterans Committee.
Yeah,
I would bet on that happening. I went to the Hall of Fame for the first time actually this summer.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever been there. And so, it is an exclusive club. But do you think that made a difference, or what do you feel like was the number one thing? Maybe just kept you out of getting in the Hall of Fame.
It might have made a little difference, but no, I think what people have told me is a couple things probably would have helped me more postseason exposure, because that helps define a player's career. Lifetime batting average is 265, which it's not that there aren't some comparables.
And nowadays that would be really good.
Good point. And so there are some. I think there's some guys that are comparable to me in the Hall of Fame, but I also knew that I wouldn't be right in. That it would wouldn't go right in. You got to wait 5 years before you're eligible. I knew it would be a while, and so I understand that, and I have no issues with that. My percentage hasn't been that high. It's in like the mid 20%. You got to get 75%. If I'd had 65%, you'd probably hear a different answer from me. I'd be very frustrated.
Sure.
Because that would only meant a few more votes
guys,
here and there. I mean, 65%. But I will say that the Hall of Fame realizes that a lot of the guys in the 70s and 80s, they haven't voted in through the Veterans Committee, and very many of those guys, they've tweaked the voting a little bit. And Jack Morris and Alan Trammell went in this year. And so my name will come up a little more often now. Mm-hmm. They've tweaked it a little bit. It's helped some guys in the 80s, those two guys. And so I still got a shot. If it happens, what can I say? I'd be overwhelmed, but I knew it was going to be a while anyway.
Yeah, baseball, I mean, has these old school, people just love the numbers, right? And I mean, and unfortunately, the 80s, the numbers just weren't that sexy for anybody. You know, I mean,
the 80s were a little different.
It was kind of a dead ball era,
right?
And so and especially when you compare it to the steroid era that came just afterwards. And so I think there's almost this like view that, you know, there wasn't these Hall of Fame players when in reality, something like you. I mean, you literally led the entire league in that era in home runs and RBIs, probably the two most important categories for an offensive player, and had 5 Gold Gloves while you were at it.
Well, thank you. I think one of the things that is a challenge is the number. You know, if you hit 35 home runs, it was quite a bit. It's relatively commonplace now and in the 90s. And so, you know, I just think I think about it whenever when the opportunity comes up. I don't spend a lot of time because I think the main thing is I'll tell you what I think about a lot. Yeah, I do think about myself occasionally getting in the Hall of Fame, but there's some guys out there I should be in the Hall of Fame that I don't understand as well.
Sure.
I mean, I could people Google Lee Smith, Jim Cott, Ted Simmons, Fred McGriff. Speaking of round numbers, has got 494 or 5 home runs. He's almost got 500 home runs.
And did it when the other guys were all rolling up.
Exactly. I mean, there's some. So I'm not the only guy.
Yeah,
I guess
sure.
There are some guys in this game that I think deserve it, that should be even ahead of me. I mean, maybe you put me in that group of guys that should be in, but there's some guys I don't understand that don't get more consideration. There's some tricky things with the voting that I think hurt some guys, but there are some guys that, you know, I'm very grateful people ask me about it, but boy, I could go through 10 names that I don't know why they're not in there.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that there's no science to it. It's just kind of like this weird, Craig Biggio got in pretty quick, but
you're right.
You got the game on the line, you get Craig Biggio or Dale Murphy at the plate. I know who I'm taking in their prime,
well,
you know. And so it's
Craig Biggio.
He was a great player as well, but no.
No, I appreciate that.
After your career was over, a lot of athletes have the problem of a really hard time adjusting to what to do next. How did you decide what you wanted to do once you were done with baseball?
Well, it is a challenge because you kind of think, well, you know, I'm going to move on to things. I'm going to be with my family, and then it just crashes down on you how much of your identity really was there. But you know, it's like that with all athletes. Mm-hmm. No matter when you're done, whenever you're done, it's no fun. I'm very thankful I got to play for a while, but high school athletes go through it. College athletes go through it.
I had no career, but I mean, I played one summer of college ball, but once I hung it up, it was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Like, that's the last time I'll ever play competitively,
yeah.
you know?
And so I can't complain. I'm very lucky, but I guess what I'm saying is I thought it was going to be easier than it was. My first 5 years was pretty rough because then you're saying, well, maybe I could still play, and what am I going to do? And
the damn Braves kept winning the whole time.
Yeah, then they're going to the World Series every year. So I just kind of hung in there, and now, I never really sought another career, so to speak, but I've really enjoyed over the years of my retirement, especially speaking. I love to speak to companies and share my stories, or to anybody, but I do like I do enjoy being out there, doing some motivational speaking and speaking on leadership and what I learned from baseball. I think it really applies to business. I enjoy that. I opened a restaurant with a
couple
of partners.
Right?
Yeah.
How's that going so far?
It's going great. We're having a lot of fun. We're close to the new Braves ballpark, so that's been a great experience for me. And, I've done a few other things, but mostly that's, what I like to do. And now with social media, I'm kind of carving out another part. I enjoy doing a blog. I do a couple columns a month for The Athletic, which is a new sports website that's doing really well. So that's fun.
I'm a subscriber to that, actually. They have amazing articles. And I've actually read all of your blog articles. And people should go to that. What's the site to go to that?
Well, DaleMurphy.com is where my blog is. And The Athletic is it's
an app, or you can just go to the site.
Yes. Yeah. It's a subscription-based a website that is really doing some unique stuff.
That's great.
And so it's fun to be a part of that. And then I'm on Twitter, of course, at Dale Murphy 3, where everybody can see me rattle off some weird tweets every once in a while. I'm on Instagram at Dale Murphy _3, and DaleMurphy.com again, and at Eat at Murph's if you want to follow us on Twitter at our restaurant.
What kind of food is it? Is it kind of your sports
bar?
Yeah,
burgers, wraps, wings, and we have a great team, and I'm lucky to be with a couple of great partners, and it really is good food. I mean,
when you go back to Atlanta, because you probably go there a lot with your restaurant. What's the reception? I'm sure you're just
it's a blast.
I bet they're just
it's a blast because we put up some baseball stuff, and it's been fun to connect with fans. They're heading over to the Braves game usually, so it's really been a unique thing. I learned a lot about the restaurant business in the last year, and you better have someone who knows what they're doing running it, and I do. So it's been a really unique, fun thing to do, and we have some good food. We got like 4.5 stars on Google, which
that's great.
Is really good.
Yeah.
And I guess I got to say this is, I appreciate now how hard it is not only to run a restaurant and to manage one, but our servers and our cooks. That's just hard work, and it really makes me appreciate going out to eat and what all is going on. I had no idea there were that many moving parts, to get you your burger.
Yeah, I think the hardest job I ever had, I was a busboy when I was 16, and by far the hardest I worked, because you got to keep on top of everything.
It's amazing. You got to stay on top. And I think I read the other day 80% of our youth first job was in a restaurant. Now it's down to 60. And I think I wish I'd have done it. I was busy playing baseball, because it's eye-opening and great place to learn how to work.
Oh, that's great. A little more appreciation when your meal's taking an extra 5 minutes, I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Boy, is that the truth. And I know it's not our server's fault.
Oh, that's awesome.
They always kind of blame it on your server. And there's a lot going on that sometimes things don't happen so well.
One of my bucket list items is I want to go to every major league stadium. I've got 4 left, and the Braves is actually one of them. So I will go down to Murph's when I...
Absolutely. Make sure you let me know. Let me know when you're well, they're playing well, too.
They are. They'll be in the playoffs
this year. They'll be in the playoffs this year. They haven't clinched yet, but
with any luck, the Indians and Braves will meet in the playoffs in the World Series again, right?
I think we'd all take that. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. But one other thing I wanted to touch on, back up a little bit. When you were done playing, you got called as a mission president, which is unique because you got called to Boston, which is a huge sports town.
Yeah.
Did a lot of people recognize you, President Murphy here, as the baseball player? And did that play to advantage or disadvantage? How did that work out?
I think there was some advantages, but not a lot. We did some really good an article in the Boston Globe. What's Dale Murphy doing here?
Yeah.
I really had some fun with that.
Okay.
Some real good exposure for the church, and I had Jim Huber, who did some great documentary pieces for WTBS back in the day. They wanted to come up and see what I was doing, and so I think is pretty typical experience of most mission presidents and their wives and their families is, no matter where you go, what you do, it's going to be it's a hard work.
Yeah.
And I was definitely in over my head. I'm grateful I had Nancy there again and great, great experience with those missionaries. But yeah, every once in a while I'd be walking. I went to a few Red Sox games, or walking downtown, and people would look at me and they'd be like,
I swear I know that guy from somewhere.
you look like Dale Murphy, and I wish I would have said, yeah, I get that a lot, but I didn't know what to say, and they, what are you doing here? And it was fun to tell them, but it was very unique. But what a great place! Yeah, Boston was fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of your blog. You talk a little bit about some of the issues with baseball. Kind of end with this, but I wanted to see. I mean, you've talked a little bit like making it more fun, the marketing message of how it's getting out. What would you do if you were a commissioner of what would you recommend that they do to kind of work towards that image of baseball?
Marketing, there's people that love baseball, and that's fine, but you got to get a lot of casual people that will turn on a baseball game too, and go to a ballpark. Attendance is down this year, maybe for a number of reasons. Who knows? I just think that it's a real unique game. You got to market. You got to be real creative and way ahead of the game in today's world. And you really can't market too much nostalgia because it doesn't appeal to kids. I was with some high school teammates of mine the other day, good baseball fans, don't follow it every day. One of them couldn't tell me where Mike Trout played.
Wow.
And that's not his fault.
Sure.
That's baseball's fault.
Yeah.
I know he's not in that market of the Angels, but and people say, well, Mike Trout doesn't, like to do a lot of things. I said, well, we got to be a little creative. We can get Mike Trout out there. We can market this game in some very creative ways, and that's just the bottom line. You got to market. You got to keep marketing. And this is a different world and a different group of young people we're marketing the game to. And I'll say one other thing. Instantly, I would institute a 20-second pitch clock in A-ball or rookie league, and then just build in the next 3 or 4 years. The game is going to go quicker, and the fans are going to have a quicker experience. We don't need a pitch clock in the outfield. Umpires would control it and keep that game moving. I think
start them in the young or in the A-ball, ball. They'll just be in the habit of
right. And this generation
right?
will come up. It's not put a 20-second pitch clock right now, but I would build toward faster pace and let the umpires control it. A lot of people don't know golf is monitored. If you get a penalty, for slow play, you got to keep the game going. And I think baseball suffers just a little bit from that. The perception that they're all 3.5 hour games, which some of them are.
Most of them,
Let's get them down to 2.5, 2:45, a little more predictable. Pitchers will pitch better. You've played behind pitchers that work quick, guys that are slow, hitters. There's a number of things going on in the game, but I would really look at our marketing, how we can do better, and speed this game up a little bit.
Well, what you said is, your diehards, your traditionalists are always going to watch. So cater some of these things to the people that you're trying to attract.
Right.
Because even though the traditionalists, maybe they don't care to sit for 4 hours, you got to attract the kid that only wants to be there for 2.5.
Right. You don't want to lose our diehards. So we got to do something that's a little more subtle than going to 7 innings.
7 innings, right.
Which, that would cut off an hour of the game. But so, exactly. Keep the diehards. We're going to have them, but they're getting older.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very challenging. I think it could be one of the more toughest marketing jobs ever, is to market a game that seems a little behind the times. How do you do it? You've got to be very creative and spend a lot of money.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, we could sit here and talk baseball all day.
Yeah, I could.
I appreciate the time you've given us.
Thank you.